Square One. Returning to life in competitive running after my devastating stroke by Dirk Vlieks. Foreword. I met Dirk Vlieks while doing something we both have spent a fair amount of time doing, running. When I first spotted him walking herky-jerky across the parking lot at Haley Farm State Park in Groton, Connecticut, I wondered who he was and what was wrong with him. On this late September morning, perfect for running, I had gathered with a handful of serious runner friends at Haley Farm, a gorgeous park with long, winding trails and views of nearby Long Island Sound. It was the perfect place for a Sunday morning run. Dirk didn't look like he would fit in with our group. I thought that he might just be ambling along on a solo walk. It didn't take Dirk long to disabuse me of my mistaken notion. He took off on a 7-mile run with the rest of us, and more than held his own. In fact, once he broke into his running stride, I couldn't help but marvel at how smoothly he moved along. Certainly his long stride belied what he had been through and how much he had accomplished to get back to running. After that first run, I got to know Dirk a bit better and slowly learned his story. Not that Dirk told me much at first about his life-threatening on-the-run episode or how much he had struggled to return to his running ways. Dirk's not the kind of guy who spends a lot of time looking back or talking about himself. I admire that. Still, I did learn that he was new to the Mystic, Connecticut running scene and quite serious about his training and racing. I gradually pieced together that Dirk had been a serious triathlon competitor with a number of Ironman finishes. The first day I saw him at Haley Farm, it was easy to see that he had been through something. I was curious to uncover more. On subsequent runs, I noticed that his gait wasn't the only strange thing about him. When he spoke, I missed some of his words. They came out a bit garbled and difficult to understand. Still, his story came through. I learned more on each of our runs and at several races. It was clear that Dirk loved to run. He popped up here, there, and everywhere local runners gathered. One day he told me he was writing a book. That particularly piqued my curiosity, since I am also a writer. Yet the more I heard from Dirk, the more I realized there were big gaps in my understanding of his background and medical history. Another time we met for lunch at the Mystic Market to talk more about books and running. Dirk told me he had completed a rough draft of his book and asked me if I would be willing to read it. Of course I agreed to. Now at last I could learn all the details I hadn't pieced together yet. Reading Square One certainly filled in the holes. It's an unblinking account of what happened to Dirk in the middle of the Honu Half Ironman. 1 minute he was jostling for position on the bike ride, the next he was collapsing to the ground after a tumor burst and caused a massive stroke. His courageous story will no doubt impress every reader. And not just because Dirk was talented and disciplined enough to make it to Honu. No, this is one of those unbelievable comeback stories. Dirk was down, way down, but he refused to stay there. In the often difficult days and years since Honu, he has worked his way back to a very close approximation of his former self. And not only that, he and his wife have had 2 beautiful girls, twins, and he has maintained his commitment to health and fitness. In fact, he's back to running marathons again. You can't go much farther than that. Amby Burfoot, Runner's World Editor-at-Large, 1968 Boston Marathon winner, Mystic, Connecticut.